The people are extremely friendly, quite stubborn, but very proud. And that's why I thought, I'm a Serb.
Meet Mark Harrison, a Brit who has been living in Serbia for 28 years. In the mid-90s, he defended Yugoslav companies against Western sanctions in British courts. Then, in 1998, he sold everything, left behind a promising career at a London law firm, and moved to Serbia. Here, he opened his own law firm, married a Serbian woman, and witnessed the birth of a new country. He shared what foreigners completely misunderstand about Serbia, how to deal with Balkan unpredictability, and what has kept him believing in the country all these years. Ajmo. Thanks to my local partner Yugotour, Socialist Belgrade by Yugo. Go before it disappears. Book for 3, pay for 2. Code ATTIC, link below.
You once said in one of your interview, the only thing predictable about the Balkans is its unpredictability. And I wonder, how can you build anything in such an environment?
It's an interesting thing. It's like with diplomats. I do see diplomats. This is one of the most interesting places to be a diplomat. Can you imagine being ambassador to Luxembourg? Being a lawyer in England, there's very much a high degree of certainty about the law and how something will be dealt with, and you can rely upon that. There's a case, not well known, I started 6.5 years ago for a friend. I said, look, I can't predict what's going to happen. I know you are in the right. I know you're right. And if it's so slam dunk that you're right, then I will carry on fighting this case. The first instance, refused. Second instance, refused. Appeal, refused. I said, Mark, thank you so much. You spent all your time for free. I said, I don't want paying anything unless you win. But I believe if this doesn't go through, I will be really upset about the Serbian legal system. And then out of the hat, after 6.5 years, one of my lawyers came running and said, you're not going to believe this, Mark, but we've won and it's non-appealable.
Wow.
And that just showed me something about, the unpredictability, but at the end of the day, force your way through, and you can do it. It is a difficult thing for a lawyer, but I just find it fascinating because I could be I could be a lawyer doing boring work in London, commuting, in Leeds, wherever. But here, because you can't really see the outcome, it makes it very interesting. That's the beauty of it. It's nothing certain. It may sound silly from a lawyer, but nothing's certain. That's really what I like about the system here, that nothing is predictable.
What do you think foreigners completely don't understand about Serbia?
Because they haven't been here, even though we're talking about 1999, let's say. Taxi drivers, when I go to the airport and I take a taxi, what's it like out there? Is it safe? Are you okay? Is there any trouble? I said, what are you talking about? It's fantastic. I've lived there 28 years. Oh, I said, get yourself out there. And this is the whole thing. The reason the British are not here, they're on a little island that should just get over here, and then you're 90% of the way there of guaranteeing they will invest in Serbia. Because they'll go in there and think, wow. And I always say the Serb young people, the most literate in the English language of any country in Central and Eastern Europe. Very bright, intelligent people, young people. I said, you've got that base. You've got the people here. You've got low taxes. It's at the center of Central and Eastern Europe. I'm pleased that the airport's opening up and it's become a center. So it's just a conception that they have. But you get them here and they completely change their approach.
Your other words from other interview. I have learned the Balkan way to understand the Balkan mentality. What did you mean by that?
Everybody in life, we've all made mistakes. And we will continue to make mistakes no matter how old we are. Someone from Yorkshire like me, if you were to say to me, Mark, I promise you this, I'll do whatever, I'd believe them. And the first 4 or 5 years here, I had all these people saying, we'll do this, business, and let's talk business now. We'll do this, we'll do that, Mark, I'll get you this, that, and the other. Never happened, or you see them at the airport, they go, give you a call. Never happened. And things like the power play, interesting little things you notice. If you're invited somewhere with a businessman and he invites you to his office, that's a sign that I'm the powerful man. If they come and see me in my office, then I'm the powerful player. I realized naively that when people promise certain things, they weren't going to happen. And it's just the way people are. But the thing I did like was silly little things. But it's like, I'd say, if I knew your brother, I'd give my best wishes to your brother. I started thinking that's a bit of a silly thing to say, but it's a very nice way of how Serbs deal with situations. You never say that in England, but, give my best wishes and whatever. And it's a good way of dealing with things. The famous word inat, as you know, it's the Serbian definition of part of their culture. Complete, extreme stubbornness in the face of reality. But once you understand that, once you understand how business is conducted, once you go to a meeting having that feeling and knowing and not coming away like many people come here and say, oh, great, we've got this, got that and the other. I say, well, just hang on a minute. Then you know and you can sense what may happen, what won't happen. And it's just a way of dealing, really being very conscious about how people react when I'm doing business with them or not. I understand the mentality, the way they're thinking when they're talking to me about business. And I think that's extremely valuable after 30 years, just to be able to understand in a meeting what's the real message.
Maybe you can share some signs during the negotiations with Serbs that can tell you that the deal will be. Because now I'm trying to establish partnerships with international schools here. I can advertise through my videos international schools here and get paid partnerships. But I come to the thought that I completely don't understand how Serbs work.
It's understanding who's the person who's going to make the decision. You can get so wrapped up with people at the third, fourth level and they greet you and you think you were getting there. And you've got to realize who is the main decision maker. You can spend hours and hours talking with whoever you wanted to and think you've got somewhere, but you'll never get anywhere because they are not the people who can say yes. They'll say they are. They'll say, Alexei, I can sort this out. I'm the person. I know. Well, the other thing is I know. Everyone knows everybody. I know X, Y, number one, number two, number three. They don't, but they'll say that. And you have to sift through these people. Our first main office was Protocol in Terazija. Now, Protocol is named after the protocol signed in 1918 when the republics of Croats, Slovenians and Serbs was signed in our boardroom at a 36-seater boardroom table.
Yeah.
And it created Yugoslavia. We kept the table, the most fantastic place. Then, as you may know, the old Ustje was the old Communist Party headquarters. That was destroyed by 2 bombs coming down. But in the days of Tito, when they'd close the building at night, they'd leave lights on to spell Tito across there. So that was the communists. So we went from the place where they formed Yugoslavia to the Communist Party headquarters. And then I went to a place in Uzička and I thought, nothing fancy about this, nothing different. Then I found out those were Tito's headquarters in the Second World War for the partisans when he kicked out the Germans. And then finally, we moved to Francuska in the center of town. And I thought, well, there's nothing special about this. And then someone said, well, you do know who lives opposite or lived opposite? I said, no, who was it? It was the Yugoslav spy in the Second World War, upon which Ian Fleming based James Bond.
Wow.
And I thought, wow, literally, I forget the name of the spy, and it's absolutely true. I read all about it. So I thought, moving from there to there to there to there, it's just the history of the place is just great. I sort of look at it sometimes and think, why me, why Serbia? I actually come from the north of England, a place called Yorkshire, where the people are extremely friendly, completely different to, say, London, quite stubborn, but very proud of where they come from. And that's why I thought, I'm a Serb. Yes, I'm Serbian, or yes, I'm Polo-Serbian, because I realized I had that certain trait which Serbs had. They're very proud of their country. They're very friendly people once you get to know them. I deliberately, when I moved here, decided to just mix with Serbs and Serbs only to get to know the country. So not to just, do the embassy trips and that sort of thing. And the big thing for me was why I really felt at home. Obviously, I was devastated when things happened from 92 to 95. And this is probably the biggest thing. Sanctions were introduced against Serbia and Montenegro from June 1992 to December 1995. Every single law firm, bar mine, said, oh, we're not going to protect the Yugoslavs, we're not going to protect the Serbs, we're not going to look after them. And I said, look, everyone deserves the right. So in the end, I was the lawyer who took the Bank of England, took the Office of Foreign Assets Control to court, in English courts, even to the European courts, to protect Yugoslavian assets, which were going to be taken away. And I used the law to protect in a very intricate way. So I sort of, in a humble way, stood up for the Serbs at a time of crisis. Protecting Aviogenex was then an airplane company. They had 4 aircraft and a Danish leasing company wanted to take them back. But I pleaded and I actually forced the Bank of England to send one of their officials over who was sort of dragged into the court. And he had to admit that if the Danish company took these planes over, it would be a benefit to Serbia, and therefore it was disallowed. Oh. And so the Danish company were really annoyed. And of course, the Serbs were very happy. And it's one of those things where once sanctions were eased, I was immediately back here. And like anything, I think if you've helped somebody in a time of crisis, they respect you for what you've done. And I think a lot of Serbs knew what I'd done. I was then reaching a certain age. I was a high-ranking partner in a big law firm, and I thought, why not open the first ever English law firm in Serbia? The first ever one. That's an ambition.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. On the 2nd of December 1999, I opened the first ever English law firm. And my parents at the time said, what is he doing?
Really?
Really thought. And I said, look, I can either be a boring lawyer going to and from a London office, or I can do something out there. I enjoyed the company. I knew what they were like, in London, on my times when I'd come over here to restaurants. And they'd always look after me.
I know that you first started to get your Yugoslav clients back in London when you were working in a law firm. How did it happen?
I am a great believer in fate. And in 1983, the biggest bank in Yugoslavia was a client of the firm I was a trainee of. As they do, they send them over and say, can you give them 6 months experience in London? And of course, in these big city law firms, you work late. And I just happened to see this poor chap from Belgrade, sat in an office late at night, called Milan. I said, Milan, I'm Mark. Do you fancy going out for a drink? And after that, as they say, the rest is history. The next day, I found myself at a football game at Tottenham Hotspur, playing Hajduk Split from Croatia, with about 100 Serbs, mostly businessmen.
Wow.
And they were the London Serbs. And that's really how it all started, because, of course, Yugoslavia was Yugoslavia then. What they called daughter companies, the subsidiaries of the big companies here, would set up in London. And it was a great honor to be a director of one of these daughter companies. So then I'd be invited by the mother company to come and meet the bosses in Belgrade in what I would call the golden era of Belgrade, which would be 88, 89, when you had the Intercontinental Hotel. I remember they had a sort of nightclub, proper nightclub called New York, New York, and every top singer from around Europe wanted to get a place in New York, New York, because it was the place to be.
Whoa.
I mean, Belgrade was known then as the Paris of Central and Eastern Europe, a really fantastic lifestyle. I remember with my wife telling me that she used to go on a trip by train to Trieste in Italy to buy shoes because there was still the wall hadn't come down, and was it 1989, something like that. And they used to go to Hungary and say, God, how poor these people are in Hungary. They'd never seen Levi jeans. And it was a completely different atmosphere.
This golden year, did you see during that time the signs that it will come to the end eventually?
No, I didn't. I mean, it was still an authoritarian, let's say, regime. But I think you knew where you stood. For example, if you were a former member of the Communist Party, you had a good position. Everything worked like clockwork. I knew how businessmen worked here. It was quite funny because obviously I'd learned some Serbian, but I always took the view, pretend you know nothing, Mark. So I go to important meetings with important people and they think Mark hasn't a clue what we're talking about. And of course I did have a clue what they were talking about, but that was a bit sneaky. But I didn't get a feeling then. It was only when I was here and around, I think the time of Slovenia, which should be, I think, early 91, when I was here, and I remember seeing a lot of helicopters flying around, and I just thought, what's going on? And that's when I realized that things were about to collapse. I'd actually told my law firm, I'd moved law firms then, set up what was called the Central and Eastern European practice. I was the head, and took everybody I could from around Central and Eastern Europe. And in late 89, 90, I got the law firm to agree to set up an office in Belgrade. And I was going to run it. And of course, my timing was not perfect.
Yeah.
Because shortly after that, the trouble started. I had a great feeling about the place. You know, I can still remember meeting a beautiful doctor on Kalamegdan Park and walking around and seeing the atmosphere. It was the social side and the feeling about the place, the river, everything just got to me. And there's a saying amongst people who've worked in Central and Eastern Europe that you find it gets under your skin. And Serbia really got under my skin. I just instantly thought, this is a great place.
So you moved to Serbia in 1998.
February 1998.
February 1998.
And
so
then
it was the second bad timing when you put a stake into Serbia.
Yeah, I had a very good friend. I won't say who he was. He was a character, a yacht pilot. And he found me my office, which was above a place called Bread of Life in Protomatea in Bracha. Then he found me my flat in Interbrigada. And he was a character. In those days, of course, the cockpits weren't bolted or anything else. And he said, you know, I'd fly down to Podgorica, for example, and he'd say, Mark, come on in. Here's the checklist, read it out. And he'd be sat there, cigarette, coffee, flaps, brakes. I'd be reading out the list before we take off the plane.
Wow.
And then as we arrived in Podgorica, right, Mark, come on, we're landing. Start reading it out, flaps, and land the plane. I just remember my first week when I stayed here. And he said, right, Mark, I'll pick you up tonight. We'll go out midweek. Okay, what time? At 10:30. At 10:30. Yeah, 10:30, I'll pick you up. I thought it was a bit late. And there was a place then in Rasavska. And we used to go there, have a great meal. Then you'd go behind the curtain and there was a beautiful nightclub, a proper nightclub. Everyone was partying. I did 1 week of that and I said, look, in fairness, I've got to work. But it was just the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I actually celebrated my 40th birthday there. And I still look back at it now and it's like yesterday. But they were just so generous people. The atmosphere, as I say, how they treated me. Some Englishman, what's he doing here? And then they knew I was staying here, living here. And it was great. It really was. Interesting time. There's a tragedy with the old bridge gone, but you look across and you see Kalamegdan. You know, I see War Island, I see the ships. And the thing I really like, it's like we have a place called Newcastle in Liverpool, these working rivers. And every morning I'll wake up and I'll see them carrying coal or carrying back.
Yeah.
And that to me is fantastic, to see a working river. I know people complain about the coal power plant and everything else, but that to me is the beauty of it all. And you look down here, You know, we used to be, our office before they built Ushta Tower 2, we're on the 24th floor of Ushta Tower. That's the one beneath the cafe. The most panoramic view, and we used to see everything happening, thunderstorms coming in. But I've always been a fan, and there's nothing against New Belgrade. I love Stari Belgrade. I love the old buildings. That's the beauty for me, is you walk around, you see some absolutely fantastic architecture. I'm completely opposed to what happened with NATO. I'm very vehement about that being a war crime. It was never anything which was sanctioned by the UN, what happened to those poor civilians and soldiers in 1999. And I was literally told at the final time to evacuate. And I felt a great sense of sorrow because the first time, there were 3 times when they threatened to bomb Serbia. The first was November 1998. And I remember taking a train through Budapest and just thinking, why am I leaving? And I was with my Serbian girlfriend. I thought, why am I leaving this place? I felt terrible. And in the end, I ended up in Sofia. And when the bomb stopped and the war stopped in June 1999, the border was closed. And this is one of the funny things. Of course, my partner, girl, had worked at the US Embassy and she had a US visa in. So everyone that met us at the closed border were military police, secret police, everybody. They accused her of being a traitor, and they said, oh, British man, he's a spy. And she said, Mark, she said to me, recite, this is how I got in, recite a Serbian menu, Jelovnik, in Serbian. So in front of all these guys with guns, grenades, everything, I had to recite everything I could remember off the top of my head in Serbian, because I was used to, my first Serbian was knowing the menu inside out. And then they said in Serbian, oh, he's a Serb, let him in.
This is it?
And that's what it is. They literally opened the border. And at that time, all the bridges from Niš to Belgrade had been bombed. And I had a Bulgarian hire car, so I went on the pontoons, which was scary in itself. Driving a car over a pontoon over a river.
Yeah.
And I came back to Belgrade, back to my flat. That was when I really realized, that I belonged with Serbia. But I witnessed very, very good friends who'd been through some tough times. There was something within them, there was still some hatred about what had happened, which I totally accept and agree. As I say, I was anti-war. I've only demonstrated once in my life, and that was with the Yugoslavs in London, with one of our controversial politicians called Tony Benn, against the war. And then we went to Tony Blair, 10 Downing Street, and we're all outside. I was shouting with the Serbs against the bombing. It's the only time I've done it, but that's when I really realized, I am Polo-Serbian. I'm half Serbian, I'm half English. And that was when the bond, I think, was really created at that time. After the bombing, realizing what they'd been through, and then thinking, let's see what can happen. And of course, the very difficult period for me personally was post June 99 until October 2000, because Milosevic was still in charge. The British embassy had evacuated. The American embassy had evacuated. I was on my own, literally. I was told, you're on your own. The Brazilian embassy said, we'll look after any British nationals, but I never needed that. But I would walk around Belgrade at that time, coming up to the revolution, as I called it, in October 2000. And there were only a few restaurants open at that time. And there were all the muck police everywhere, tear gas, whatever. And of course, the minute I'd open my mouth in English in a restaurant, everyone was looking at me and what's going on. And I knew I was being followed, and I knew an incident once, I know, in Montenegro, where I actually went down with my wife for business, and we came back from the restaurant and the hotel room was filled with smoke, our room, after we'd gone out for dinner. And they just opened the door. A guy from the Secret Service, he just smoked, closed the door, gone out. Oh. And it was a message to say, we know where you are, we know what you're doing, which was simply legal work. But that's the time. And then, of course, the historic time for me when I really, I was a Serb, was the day of the revolution. I actually lived in a road called Dobrinska, which is where the old parliament used to be, and opposite where the president's place still is, just off Kralja Milana now. And it was the day when everyone was told to come out and demonstrate. And, Chachak and everybody. Whatever, I can't remember. People estimate the amount of people was around 500,000. It was amazing. And Parliament was opposite. The Parliament building was opposite. And we went out thinking, this is it, it's our chance to overthrow Milosevic and the regime. And the scariest thing was they fired a nasty type of tear gas. I mean, I knew the smell of tear gas from walking around the previous 18 months because there'd be sporadic incidents. They fired this and there was a stampede in the crowd, which was very crazy and dangerous. And I went back to our flat very close by and thought, oh God, that's it, it's gone. And we were watching and all of a sudden on the TV we saw smoke coming. And then of course, if everyone knows, what the story was which came out, it was a signal. There was a guy in a pink shirt or a red sweater, something like that. Uh-huh. As a signal to the police who'd already agreed it, that they would move away. The minute the pink guy went behind, they moved off, everyone moved in. I walked up and down all night celebrating, but there was a fear amongst everybody that next day the army would move in and that would be it. So I was walking from Slavia Square right the way up to the Democratic Party headquarters and back, singing, dancing, till about 7 in the morning. And then I said to my partner, we weren't married then, I said, can I go to the parliament? And it was all the guys from, I think, Chachak, whatever, the tractor drivers. And of course, it was burning out.
Yeah.
And they said, oh, no Serbs. No, he's English. English, okay, come in. No Serbs, in case there were traitors, false. Uh-huh. Englishman wasn't. And I hate whiskey. But they said, here, Serbian, bottle of whiskey. So I was sat drinking a bottle of whiskey with these guys guarding the Parliament building in October 2000, thinking, this is history. And I couldn't believe it. And the next day, again, rather stupidly of me, I just walked over with the burnt out cars and the burnt out building and took some photographs of me, outside there and sent them stupidly to what we call, let's say, our main legal magazine in England, just as a joke.
And they published it.
And they put it on the front page.
Oh, yeah.
And then we heard that the army had said, we're not moving out of the barracks. And that was it. And then the celebrations really started. And we knew, and then it was simply a time until Milosevic was removed from his compound in Djindjic. And then when, of course, the government came in late 2000, I was just flying back to England for Christmas, and I'd heard the government had been elected, and of course, I knew these people from before. I knew who was in there. And when I came back in the beginning of 2001, the place just went crazy. And in the end, in November 2002, I'd met then, I think they still have it, the British Embassy residence in Djindjic had a swimming pool. And I was sat there with, in the time of Djindjic, a barbecue with Zoran Djindjic, his wife, Montgomery, who was the US ambassador, his wife, and I decided to get married. And the ambassador's wife, British ambassador's wife, was from Yorkshire. I said, I really don't know where to get married. Have it here, Mark. Where? At the residence. I said, you're joking. Come on, got a garden, have it here. So we were the only couple ever to get married at the residence.
What did you feel when Zoran Djindjic was assassinated?
I was terrible because our office then was in Terazia, and I knew the place where the killer was above still a cafe there called Monument. And we heard the commotion. And I just thought, is this the end? Zoran came in with all his promises. And he was democratic. He was a very nice guy. I met him many a time. And I just thought then, is it all going back to the dark ages? But it didn't. It carried on. I think what you had to accept, certainly from my point of view as a businessman, was governments would change. You could never get too close to a government because it might change one way or another way. But my big regret for Serbia is that during the bad times from 1990 to 2000, I forget how many hundreds of thousands of young Serbs left the country because they saw no future. And that's the sad thing. What I would like to see happen is people believe in Serbia again that have left, the talent that's left, and come back to Serbia with their talents, their Western talents, because that was a lost generation for me. 10 years of very bright students going to study abroad. And I could see it, everybody did it. That was the sad thing, and I've always wanted now to get Serbia back in a situation. My personal wish is to get Serbia back in a situation in 1989, 1990, the glory years, so that they are on a par, or even better, than the neighbouring countries, which used to be way below them. And I think that's what I feel now about Serbs is there's a longing to get back to where we were. We've lost that. Now we want to get back to where we were before as the leader, literally the leading country in Central and Eastern Europe. And it was the leading country. Belgrade was the capital. And one of the signals for me, although I don't obviously go there now, is the fact that I know that at weekends, the great sign for me is that kids, students will come from Slovenia, from Croatia, from Macedonia to Belgrade for the weekend and mix together without any problems at all. Play Croatian music, dance to it. Play Montenegrin music, dance to it. So they're the new generation, and they're forgetting about the past and the history and everything. And that's how I like to see it in the future. That's my dream, really.
You said you like old buildings and Stari Grad, but we are now in Belgrade waterfront.
If you look at what this was before, run down, awful bus station, now you look at it now, it has revitalized. There's lots of buildings around here. But overall, in my view, if you forget about people may say oppose it or whatever politically, but for me, it's a good thing for Belgrade to have the tower, the symbol. Just identifies again, Belgrade's growing up, we're getting bigger. Look at us now, we're not like we were before. So for me, just non-politically, I think it's a very positive thing. And I'm just being Aquarius. I love being by the water.
What do you think this process of second generation of people who moved out in the 90s from Serbia, do you see this wave of coming back? Because from my point of view, I see it a lot.
People do. I mean, there's so many people I know that left and went to London, older people who went and lived in London, bought houses, flats, whatever. And in the past 5 years, they've come back. I think, and I'm not in, I'm not on any political agenda at all. Obviously, some people are watching the situation, let's say, as it stands in Serbia at the moment. But I would say, all things being equal, people who have gone abroad, this is the whole homesickness, to have their kids educated here, in their native language here, to live the Serbian way of life, and hopefully have the same opportunities if they went to Germany, the same sort of job they can get, a salary, whatever. That's not the case now, but that's what I want to see happen in the future. It's, as I say, just that peculiarity about Serbs that, you can take them out of Serbia. It's the saying in Yorkshire, you can take a man out of Yorkshire, but you can't take Yorkshire out of a man. It's the same with Serbs. I've seen that, and you see them, and all the time, oh, Serbia, and I tell them, what I'm eating and doing, and going out for Božić and celebrating, and New Year's Eve, and I wish I was there. I think when you have a love for a country, as a country itself, it's a very nice thing to have. If I look back at how I ended up here, pure chance. Meeting a lawyer at night in a big law firm. I had no relations whatsoever here. Meeting my wife was pure luck. We had British Airways flights from Gatwick. Her boss was in business class. I was at the back because, I was the poor little lawyer at the back. He knew me. We're going back to 1997, September. Oh, Mark, come up here. You know, I'm flying every week. Yeah, sit him down, put him down here. Mark, do you want to come and see Miss Yugoslavia tonight? I said, what? The modelling contest. I've never been to a beauty contest in my life, and I never will go to one again.
Yeah.
But he was on at the Hyatt. And he went to this Miss Yugoslavia in the Hyatt, and he brought along his PA. I married her. And that was just what night. The fate, the everything. I like the Serbs, they like me. I was a single man, and it was like pioneering. When I look back, and sometimes I think to myself, why did you do that, Mark? But then I look back and think, look, people always say to me, you know, how long have you been here? And I said, 28 years living. Do you like it? I said, look, there's an English word. The proof is in the pudding. If I've lived here for 28 years, that means I like it. And that's what I've done.